Discover how a millionaire's unexpected act transformed a little girl's Christmas after heartbreak. Winter settled heavily over the small town, but within Sarah's heart, the chill felt unbearable. Christmas was nearing, yet her world had dimmed since her mother's departure. The spark of joy buried beneath layers of sorrow. Anger and grief twisted like thorny vines in her chest, making it difficult to breathe. Could there still be magic this year? After her father lost his job at the factory, their home felt more like a cave than a sanctuary. Sarah's mind raced with fears. She longed to see their bright decorations return, to breathe in the scent of pine and cookies. But all she came home to was silence. The echo of her mother's laughter now a ghost haunting the hollowed halls. Every day, she watched her father stumble through the haze of his sorrow, his broad shoulders slumping under unseen burdens. It terrified her, the thought that she could lose him too. Sarah's own grief became a weight on his shoulders. It was a sickening dilemma. She wanted to comfort him, yet their shared anguish only deepened her sense of isolation. Those holiday decorations that once brought them joy now felt like reminders of everything they had lost. She wanted to scream, to tell someone, but who would listen? Suddenly, an emotional storm brewed within her, a blizzard of doubt and despair as she faced the reality of their bleak holiday. On the verge of understanding that perhaps she'd never truly be happy again, a quiet neighbor became a vessel for her plight, revealing to a stranger the depth of her suffering. Unbeknownst to her, that stranger, Thomas, stood on the edge of a decision that could change everything. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. By Christmas Eve, Sarah felt something shift, like an undercurrent pulling at her. Wrapped in the throes of anticipation and despair, she suddenly felt compelled to seek whatever trace of hope remained, but it was mixed with confusion. Thomas's unexpected decision to help Southside seemed too far removed from her reality, a world of pristine wealth that felt entirely out of reach. Would accepting this act of kindness make her weak? Or would it be a betrayal of her mother's memory? She could feel her breathing growing irregular, heart racing as flurries of agitation took root, and there it was, the moment her desperation collided head-on with her need for connection. The confronting shadows of a lonely millionaire began to tease out the truths buried deep within her. With an aching heart, Sarah knew she would soon uncover who had been behind those mysterious gifts. Could she reconcile the type of grace that came from a stranger she had never met, from a life so different from her own? And would he understand the weight of her sorrow? Yet as she gingerly approached the unveiling of this unexpected partnership, a question hung in the air. Would the journey they were about to take strip away her carefully guarded barriers, or would it leave her feeling even more lost? As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the stakes were higher. Either she would reach for the light or remain lost in the shadows of her grief. The clock struck midnight, the silence punctuated only by the soft crunch of snow beneath Sarah's boots as she approached the front door. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of her uncertainties was pressing down on her shoulders. She had spent hours debating her next move, the internal conflict raging like a tempest. To accept help from Thomas felt like admitting defeat, a surrender to despair that would irrevocably alter her reality. Yet to reject it might mean giving up a chance at joy, at something resembling the childhood she once knew. She hesitated, gripping the doorknob tightly, the cold metal biting into her palm. A stark reminder of how life could chill her heart just as easily. Suddenly the door swung open, revealing her father standing there, his worn features illuminated by candlelight that flickered like hope. His gaze darted to her, confusion mingling with a faint spark of something resembling pride. He, too, had been wrestling with his shadows, yet here was his daughter, poised to confront a reality neither had prepared for. "Sarah, what's wrong?" he asked gently, concern etched in his brows. The same love that once shielded her now tugged at her heartstrings, igniting the embers of her longing for connection. I think someone wants to help us," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the haunting wind. Her father processed her words slowly, the flicker of comprehension igniting his eyes. "You mean Thomas?" She nodded, a surge of brave determination crashing over her. "He's done so much already, Dad. Maybe we could let him help. Just a little?" His shoulders sagged as he stepped back from the doorway. "You know, Sarah," he began, voice heavy with unuttered emotions, "there's a fine line between accepting help and losing your independence. I never wanted you to feel beholden to anyone." The weariness in his tone reflected her own inner battle. Did relying on Thomas somehow cheapen their struggles? Or could it be a lifeline, a path to healing? "Dad, I don't think it makes us weak," she broke in, desperation lacing her words. "It's not about losing ourselves. It's about finding a way to be whole again." As the weight of her conviction settled between them, she saw a flicker in his eyes, an acknowledgement of her growing voice, the emergence of a newfound resilience. Perhaps they could navigate these uncharted waters together. The following days unfolded like pages in a book, as Thomas's gifts continued to arrive, each one unearthing pieces of joy buried beneath layers of grief. It wasn't about the material items, but the simple beauty of connection. The way the laughter would return, the way Christmas lights began to twinkle again in the cold darkness. Yet with each moment of joy came the weight of uncertainty. Each gift carried with it questions that gnawed at her. Who was Thomas really, and what had motivated him to reach out? Could a bridge form between their vastly different worlds, or would the chasm of their experiences continue to widen? It was a risk that gnawed at her, and with every whispered story shared in the quiet moments between her and her father, Sarah began to uncover her own hidden strength. She was no longer simply a girl mourning her mother. She was a daughter discovering the depths of love and compassion, and in that exploration, a stronger version of herself was born. But as she leaned into these changes, the specter of her mother loomed, a bittersweet reminder of loss intertwined with growth. Could she truly embrace this newfound sense of self without forgetting the lessons her mother had imparted? The holiday lineup began to shimmer with possibility, yet life had a twist of its own. Just when all seemed to be finally aligning, the phone rang, and with that call, everything she thought she had begun to understand was about to shift again. Would Sarah face another challenge to her burgeoning independence? The cold air prickled against her skin as she hesitated, knowing that deeper lessons loomed ahead. The phone's shrill ring shattered the fragile tranquility that had settled over Sarah's home, the sound slicing through her thoughts with unsettling clarity. It was as if the universe itself had conspired to interrupt her newfound sense of peace. She stared at the device, its screen illuminating her expressive face, and her heart raced. What if it was bad news? What if it was good news? Each scenario played out painfully in her mind, revealing the raw uncertainty that still lay beneath her veneer of strength. "Are you going to answer that?" her father asked from the couch where he sat, his voice almost a whisper, laced with weariness. His eyes carried the weight of their shared burden, a constant reminder of the years spent navigating sorrow and estrangement. With a steadying breath, Sarah picked up the phone. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, yet it bore an urgency that instantly gripped her. It was Susan, the head of the community foundation that Thomas had spoken about. "Sarah, I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I wanted to discuss something important regarding Thomas," she said, the rustling of papers punctuating her words. "He mentioned your family, and there's a chance we can help further, but we need to address some concerns, and I thought it best to speak with you directly." The open-ended nature of Susan's message stirred a storm within Sarah. "What concerns?" she demanded, caution enveloping her like a thick fog. It felt too soon for anyone to challenge the fragile balance they had begun to forge. I understand this may be sensitive, but we need to ensure that Thomas's assistance is not misconstrued. He has been through some personal hardships of his own, Susan said delicately, pausing, as if searching for the right words. The Foundation suspects that there may be people trying to take advantage of his goodwill. Her father shifted uncomfortably on the couch, and Sarah could feel the tension radiating from him. Questions bubbled to the surface. Had they invited trouble into their lives with Thomas's generosity? Or had they, out of their desperate circumstances, allowed misconceptions to cloud their perceptions? "We're very grateful for his help," Sarah asserted, unsure if she was trying to convince Susan herself or both. "He's done what he can to support us." As the conversation continued, doubt nibbled at the corners of Sarah's mind. This new layer of complexity threatened to undo the emotional progress she had made. How could she navigate the murky waters of dependence and independence when the motives of others were so entangled with her own? After the call ended, Sarah felt a swirling tide of apprehension. She turned to her father, who seemed lost in thought, the flickering candlelight casting shadows on his lined face. "Dad," she said, her voice cutting through the silence with newfound resolve. "Maybe we should reach out to Thomas ourselves. I need to understand this before it creates a rift." "Are you sure? What if it turns out to be true? There are risks in digging deeper." That statement hung in the air, the gravity of its weight unmistakable. Tooling through her own conflicting emotions, Sarah questioned whether uncovering the truth would fill the cracks of their recent joy or deepen the fissure. But her mind raced with the thought of becoming passive once again, suffocating under the blanket of doubt. "I need to confront this head-on, Dad," she said finally, a fierce determination developing from the inner turmoil. "I won't let fear guide us anymore." Her father's gaze softened as he took in her unwavering spirit. They would face whatever came next together. As they set about devising a strategy to speak with Thomas, hope and fear danced a fine line in Sarah's chest. Would the confrontation strengthen her and their family, or would it unravel everything they had begun to rebuild? The night wrapped around them like an old blanket, heavy with unanswered questions. Somewhere in the depths of her uncertainty lay the potential for transformation. But that potential came at the price of risk. As Sarah stepped into the night, phone clutched tightly in her hand, she knew that the moment of truth was on the horizon. It wasn't just a conversation coming. It was the beginning of her choice between clarity and confusion, strength and vulnerability. And with that decision looming, Sarah couldn't shake the chilling feeling that everything she had struggled to reassemble might soon be tested in ways she had never anticipated. The cold night air bit at Sarah's cheeks as she walked toward the small cafe where she'd arranged to meet Thomas. Each step was weighed down by a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She had rehearsed various scenarios in her mind, what she would say, how Thomas might respond, but the reality of facing him loomed larger than any hypothetical conversation. Deep inside, she questioned her resolve. What if their fears were unfounded? What if this encounter shattered the fragile bond they had begun to forge? Her stomach twisted at the thought, but she knew that avoiding the discussion would not bring her peace. It would only stretch her apprehension to unbearable lengths. As she entered the cafe, the warmth washed over her, contrasting sharply with the chill of uncertainty she felt. Sarah found a table close to the window, tapping her fingers nervously against the wood, the familiar rhythm doing little to calm her racing heart. Minutes passed, each tick of the clock amplifying her inner turmoil. She glanced around, her eyes searching for a sign, a reassuring smile that could confirm her decision was right. Then she saw him. Thomas, with his tousled hair and casual demeanor, entering the cafe. Her heart thudded heavily as he made his way toward her, that comfortable smile flickering on his face. "Hey, Sarah," he said, settling across from her. "Thanks for meeting me. I was surprised to hear you wanted to talk." She searched his expression for any signs of insincerity, but all she found was kindness. Yet, the concern Susan had voiced nagged at her, like an unwelcome guest. "I appreciate you coming. I wanted to discuss what Susan mentioned regarding your involvement with us," she started, her voice steadying as she forged ahead. Thomas's brow furrowed. "I had a feeling it would come up. I don't know what she told you, but I want you to know that my intention has always been to help." "Help or not," Sarah said, voice firmer than before. "There's a worry that your generosity might be misinterpreted or exploited. Are you aware of that?" He paused, considering her words. "I've faced my share of skeptics. It can get complicated when you're trying to help. People may want to twist facts for their benefit," he admitted, glancing out the window, as if hoping to escape the conversation's weight. "Exactly," she pressed. "But we're not those people. My dad and I could—" He cut her off gently. "But that's the concern, Sarah. You and your father are in a vulnerable position. Some people see that as an opportunity." The air around them thickened with tension, the immediacy of her emotions pressing down like an anchor. "So you've thought about this," she replied, hurt creeping into her voice. "But still, you chose to help anyway. Why?" Thomas leaned forward, his eyes earnest. "Because I know what it's like to feel trapped and powerless. I've had my share of struggles. I thought that by helping you, I could find a sense of purpose." In that moment, Sarah caught a glimpse of his vulnerability, a reflection of her own fears and uncertainties. "You're not ashamed to reach out, then. Yet if there are those who want to take advantage of you, what does that mean for us? We can't ignore this." Her words left an imprint between them, a softening of the walls built from fear. It was a truth neither of them wanted to confront, but needed to acknowledge. As the conversation continued, an unexpected alliance began to stitch itself together, each shared thought weaving their destinies closer. Yet, as Sarah felt the connection growing, the reality of the challenge lay just beneath the surface. She needed to safeguard this newfound bond against the potential dark motives lurking in the shadows. With the stakes rising higher than ever before, Sarah sat straighter in her chair, her resolve crystallizing. "We need to establish boundaries, Thomas, to ensure that both of us are protected moving forward." He nodded slowly, a new understanding dawning in his expression. "I agree. Maybe we can set up guidelines, clear roles." Suddenly, recognition flickered in Sarah's mind. Establishing boundaries was not only an act of protection, but also an assertion of her own growing confidence. No longer a passive recipient of help, she was becoming an active participant in defining her future. But before this realization could fully take hold, a shadow passed over her certainty. It was a sinking feeling that perhaps there was more to this situation than either of them had anticipated, and the path forward would not be as straightforward as they hoped. As they continued their discussion, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that hidden complexities might soon surface, threatening the fragile balance they were crafting. What came next would undoubtedly test the very essence of her burgeoning strength, challenging her in ways she could never have imagined. And it was with a wary heart that Sarah realized this was only the beginning of their journey into the uncertain depths of goodwill and trust. What skeletons would emerge from the shadows to disrupt their fragile communion? The cafe buzzed softly around them, an almost oblivious backdrop to the electric tension at their table. The warmth that had enveloped Sarah upon entering had transformed into a discomforting blanket, stifling and heavy. Her mind raced with the weight of their exchange, each word ricocheting against her inner doubts. "What if we're risking too much?" she murmured, her unease bubbling up once more. "What if this trust leads to... What if we can't navigate the consequences?" Thomas regarded her with a mixture of concern and resolve. "That's what we're here to figure out. If we establish trust as our foundation, we'll have a stronger structure to rely on." Sarah took a deep breath as she connected with the essence of his statement. A foundation built on trust was a controlled chaos, not unlike finding order within disorder. But even as she gathered her thoughts, She worried about their precarious position. They were clinging to an untested loyalty, a flickering candle amid the harsh winds of skepticism. "Let's not just talk about the guidelines," she suggested, her voice gaining strength. "We need to outline the tangible steps, the what comes next, how we can monitor not just our interactions, but also potential outside influences." "Absolutely," he nodded, appearing invigorated by her newfound assertiveness. "For instance, we could decide to meet regularly to check in on each other's feelings and observations. Transparency might help us keep the shadows at bay." This mutual exchange, where both principles and tactics intertwined, felt empowering. Yet shadows lingered at the edge of Sarah's awareness, casting doubts like fleeting figures in peripheral vision. She could feel the pulse of uncertainty beneath her growing conviction, challenging her to confront her reservations openly. "Maybe we could also create clear consequences for when those boundaries are crossed. It's more than monitoring, it's accountability," she proposed, channeling her apprehension into actionable steps. "That will emphasize how serious we are about this." Thomas leaned back, admiration flickering across his features. "Sarah, I'm impressed. That's a solid approach, and it shows you're thinking critically about our situation." His praise felt good, yet the reality of their discussions weighed heavily. Developing a strategy was more than an intellectual exercise. It implied a measure of vulnerability she was not fully comfortable exposing. Every time she took a step forward, past memories of betrayal threatened to drown her sense of progress. "Thank you. But I worry. We're crafting this framework with the assumption that we can fully trust each other. What if I'm misguided? What if I misinterpret your actions?" Sarah expressed, allowing her apprehension to surface. "Then we figure it out together," he replied unfazed. "We communicate. We assess intention versus impact. It's not about reaching perfection. It's about flexibility and understanding." As he spoke, a renewed instinct flickered to life in her mind. His focus on flexibility echoed something she hadn't fully acknowledged: the need for her to extend the same grace to herself. She didn't have to have all the answers or eliminate every risk. She just had to engage wisely and continually develop her understanding. But as revelations opened pathways for growth, another reality loomed ominously over her: the ever-present specter of betrayal, a shadow that wasn't going away. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, reminding her that the world outside the cafe walls still harbored threats she couldn't entirely grasp. "Okay, so we establish guidelines, but we can't forget that treachery sometimes comes in familiar forms. School, friends, my situation. This can become overwhelming if we're not careful," she said, her voice trembling with the weight of her unspoken fears. "Then we stay vigilant. As long as we're on the same team, we can navigate these complexities together," Thomas assured, but a new intensity clenched in Sarah's chest. Being on a team meant being vulnerable, taking risks she wasn't ready to embrace yet. With glances exchanged that carried the testament of their evolving partnership, they continued to dialogue, each word a step toward clarity, but also a deeper plunge into potentially treacherous waters. Yet darkness lingered, the very essence of their endeavor. The trust they were fighting to cultivate still hung precariously in the balance. As shadows crept closer, Sarah felt an undeniable urgency to confront an unspoken truth that threatened to disrupt everything. Much like their conversation, life could twist unexpectedly. She'd have to learn to adapt quickly. What lay ahead, not only in their discussions but in her personal context, could unravel everything she had taken a stand to fortify. And so, as the cafe hummed around them, a realization pierced Sarah's thoughts. In navigating the precarious pathways of trust, she was on the verge of confronting her deepest fears, fostering relationships that could either solidify her world or bring about her ruin. The next moment could be a tipping point, where their intentions collided with the harsh realities of their lives. Would she be ready to embrace what came next? The sun dipped low outside the cafe window, casting elongated shadows over Sarah's hands. Anxiety twisted in her stomach as she replayed their exchange in her mind, each moment pregnant with potential. The flickering candle on their table, despite its dim light, seemed to symbolize the fragile flame of her newfound resolve. As she shifted in her seat, Sarah took stock of her surroundings. Despite the bustling cafe atmosphere, an acute awareness settled around her, an intense realization that their conversation would be pivotal in shaping her journey. It wasn't just about crafting guidelines with Thomas. It was about dredging up the vulnerabilities she had buried deep under layers of self-protection. "Let's make a plan," Sarah said, the determination in her voice surprising even herself. "A detailed one. I think if we identify scenarios that can lead to misunderstandings, we can remedy them before they escalate." "Good idea," Thomas replied, interest piqued. "We can brainstorm a list of common pitfalls. Naming them might take away some of their power." Naming the pitfalls. That phrase echoed within her. Taking a stand against her fears had always felt daunting, but perhaps vulnerability didn't have to be as paralyzing as it once seemed. She realized that she was striving to turn past trauma into learning experiences, lessons that could harmonize with her growth. "Let's start with my school situation," Sarah proposed, protecting her voice from trembling. "There's pressure there, leading to competition and comparison, and I often feel like I'm walking a tightrope. I fear that any misstep could fracture any trust I build, not only with you, but with everyone else around me." "Let's think about how to gauge that," Thomas responded thoughtfully. "We can create a check-in process, either weekly or bi-weekly. You could journal your feelings as a way to monitor your reactions, but also what triggers those feelings." A journal. The notion struck her as both liberating and terrifying. Capturing her thoughts, anxieties, and triumphs on paper felt like exposing her innermost self. But she felt an urge to accept this challenge. It would be an act of courage, a tangible way to confront her experiences and translate them into growth. "I'll give it a try," she agreed cautiously. "But it's going to be hard for me to be honest with myself. I have a tendency to gloss over my own anxieties." "Honesty is the part that will matter most," he replied, leaning in slightly, as if drawing her into a deeper understanding. "You have to meet yourself where you are. That's the only way to cultivate real resilience." Sarah hesitated at that thought, feeling the weight of accountability settle onto her shoulders. Was she truly ready to confront herself openly? She envisioned her journal, pages filled with her vulnerabilities, and realized that for the first time, she did not want to back down. "Let's tackle one fear at a time," she suggested, her heartbeat quickening as newfound adrenaline flooded her veins. "What about my fear of what others think? If I embrace my true self, it could invite judgment. But if I'm brave, there's a chance I could connect with someone on a more meaningful level." "That's a solid point to start with," Thomas agreed, his approval injecting more clarity into her resolve. "Taking chances might reveal parts of you that would have otherwise remained hidden. Try approaching those interactions with curiosity rather than fear, asking questions instead of anticipating judgment." Curiosity. The word struck her like lightning. It was an active choice to engage with both her fears and others in a way that invited exploration. As she imagined her interactions transformed through curiosity rather than apprehension, her shoulders lightened and a flicker of excitement replaced her anxiety. The cafe noise blurred into the background as their exchange unfolded further. By focusing on the possibility of genuine engagement rather than the fear of rejection, Sarah found herself edging toward potential liberation. But even as she ventured further into this discussion, a darker thought loomed. What if her attempts at vulnerability did invite betrayal? As the minutes ticked by, her internal struggle simmered. There was no denying it. Deep-seated fear had unleashed its grip, but would she have the resolve to rise above it? And at that moment, an unexpected figure entered the cafe, one who would soon add further complexity to her fragile promise of stability. Would this disrupt the delicate budding trust she was attempting to forge? Sarah's heart raced as she glanced up, her trembling fingers momentarily freezing over her half-finished cup of coffee. The figure stepping through the cafe door felt oddly familiar, It was Claire, a former classmate who had often been the barometer of social acceptance during their school years. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to retreat, to curl up inside herself and blend into the noise. But she held her ground, catching her breath. "Hey, Sarah!" Claire's voice sliced through the murmur of chatter like a blade. She approached their table with an unmistakable confidence, her bright smile contrasting sharply with the shadows of Sarah's unease. "Hi, Claire," Sarah replied, summoning her courage. She exchanged glances with Thomas, who appeared to be studying the interaction with the intensity of a mentor assessing a student's courage. "Do you mind if I join you?" Claire asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from Sarah. Just a week earlier, the thought of Claire sitting across from her, with her carefully curated social persona, would have triggered Sarah's insecurities. But now, with Thomas's guidance fresh in her mind, Sarah felt a flicker of determination rise. "Not at all," Sarah said, her heart pounding in her chest as she invited Claire in. Every moment felt monumental, a test of both her newfound resolve and the tenuous trust she was trying to build. Claire settled into the chair, her presence radiating an air of authority that both intimidated and intrigued Sarah. They engaged in small talk, exchanging polite pleasantries about school and upcoming plans. When out of the blue, Claire leaned in conspiratorially. "I heard about some struggles you've been having," she said, her tone turning serious. "I wanted to see how you're doing. I mean, I know we weren't the closest in school, but I'm here if you need to talk. A lot of people care more than you realize." The words struck Sarah like a revelation. How easy it had been to inhabit a world where she believed everyone was judging her, all the while failing to notice the support surrounding her. Suddenly, she was faced with a moral conundrum. Would she take the opportunity to expose her vulnerabilities, or would she retreat to the safe harbor of silence? I appreciate that, Claire. It's interesting that you mention it, because I'm actually working on embracing my vulnerabilities. The moment she voiced that truth, Sarah felt lighter, almost as if shedding an invisible coat that had weighed her down for years. "What do you mean?" Claire's curiosity blazed. "Vulnerabilities? Seriously, it seems like you've always had it together." "Maybe that's just the surface," Sarah admitted, meeting Claire's gaze directly. It felt like a leap toward honesty, a small act of courage amplified by the presence of Thomas, still listening quietly. "I'm trying to get better at being myself, which is scary, especially with people I feel have it all figured out." Claire nodded, surprising Sarah. "I get that. We all have our battles." There was unexpected empathy in her voice, unearthing a sense of camaraderie Sarah hadn't anticipated. The conversation unfolded, weaving through shared experiences that echoed the struggles of adolescence. As they shared laughter over awkward school memories, Sarah recognized that vulnerability was less about fear and more about creating connections. It was a spark illuminating paths she had never dared to explore. However, as she navigated this moment of openness, a wisp of doubt circled her thoughts. What if Claire's seemingly genuine concern was a mask for judgment? What if, by embracing this connection, Sarah risked reopening old wounds? With that question lingering, Sarah felt a soft tremor of resolve entwine with dread. She realized that her journey wouldn't simply be a straight line toward growth. It would extend into the uncharted territory of complex relationships, entangled emotions, and newly formed bonds. Just then, Claire dismissed her previous reservations with a simple question. "So, what's next for you, Sarah? Are you ready to really step out of your comfort zone?" The weight of the inquiry loomed large, and Sarah knew that an opportunity for growth awaited just beyond the horizon of her hesitations. The time had come for her to decide whether she would embrace the next step or hide behind the veil of fear once again. A rush of emotions flared within Sarah as Claire's question settled heavily in the air. This was a defining moment, the kind that demanded clarity of thought and purpose. For the first time, instead of deflecting or overthinking, Sarah could feel her inner compass adjusting, directing her toward a path where she could assert herself with confidence. Honestly, I'm not sure, she admitted, her voice steadying. Part of me thinks I should just dive into something new, like public speaking or a class that challenges me. But there's this other part that worries about the potential for failure. Claire leaned back slightly, considering Sarah's words. Fear of failure is a common hurdle, but you've made progress, Sarah. Just look at how you're engaging with me right now. That's a win. The acknowledgement felt both invigorating and intimidating. Each compliment acted like a small flame, warming the edges of her anxiety and igniting a spark of courage deep within her. You're right, Sarah said, instinctively shifting her posture to reflect her evolving resolve. I have been trying to stand taller, both figuratively and literally. This sparked an unexpected moment of connection. Claire's eyes seemed to brighten with understanding, reflecting a shared experience rather than the usual judgment Sarah anticipated. Then why not set a goal for yourself? Something small to push your boundaries, but tangible enough to share with others, like starting a blog or hosting a workshop. The suggestion hung between them, tantalizing and terrifying. A blog could become a platform for her voice, a canvas to explore her thoughts and share her vulnerabilities. Creating a workshop would require coordination on her part, and an opportunity to engage face-to-face with others. Those thoughts collided with an impulsive wave of judgment. Who would want to hear from her? But then she steadied that rebellion against her own heart, recognizing that a concept meant for growth must endure discomfort. Maybe I could write about my experiences with vulnerability, she said, envisioning the beginnings of an idea. Document the journey of confronting my fears and embracing change. A smile bloomed on Claire's face. Exactly. Sharing your story could inspire others who feel as lost as you did. There is remarkable strength in being honest and open about your journey. It girls like you, doing the hard work, show there is no single path to success. Sarah felt a swell of hope. This was the validation she craved, and it opened an unknown door of possibility. But a flicker of doubt still lurked. What if her vulnerabilities were too raw, too personal to share? What if she exposed herself, only to be met with indifference or scorn? Steeling herself, Sarah resolved to harness that doubt as fuel rather than a barrier. I want to make this work, Claire, but it means actively stepping out of my comfort zone, something I've historically resisted, she admitted. Then embrace it, Claire urged. Find a way to channel that fear into something constructive. Use it to drive you forward. You won't always feel ready or adequate, but that's the essence of growth, pushing through despite the doubts. In that moment, as the cafe buzzed around them, Sarah realized that growth wasn't a solitary endeavor. It was as much about connections as it was about self-discovery. Claire's willingness to engage with her vulnerabilities marked a foundational change in Sarah's understanding of herself. Here was a peer, once steeped in her world of social dynamics, now transforming into a source of inspiration. With each exchanged word, she felt the constraints of her past loosening. As they concluded their conversation, an invitation lingered in the air, an invitation to embrace the challenge ahead. Sarah's heart raced not from fear this time, but from a burgeoning anticipation of what lay ahead. The fog of doubt began to lift slowly yet surely, revealing a brighter landscape filled with potential. Claire, would you want to join me when I start my blog? Maybe even share your experiences. It could be fascinating for readers. Claire's eyes sparkled with interest, but a serious note returned. I'd love to, but remember, this journey is ultimately yours. I've shared the perspective. Now it's time for you to take the lead. With that, Sarah felt fortified by one simple truth. The path to personal development would demand resilience, the willingness to engage in discomfort, and moments that challenged her identity. As they stood to leave, Sarah couldn't help but feel a newfound purpose surge within her, a definition of self that she had been searching for. Now, with her mind ablaze with ideas, the next question formed almost instinctively. What if revealing her fears led to unexpected revelations about her true self? What if learning to articulate her experiences unlocked hidden talents? As she stepped out of the cafe, the potential for transformation felt palpable, ready to be seized. It was time to confront the next step, the fear of truly sharing her voice with the world. Sarah took a deep breath, ready for what came next. Stepping out of the cafe, the brisk air enveloped Sarah like a cloak, invigorating her senses. Each breath felt purposeful, laced with the lingering excitement of her revelation. The thought of starting a blog ignited a fire within her, but alongside it came a whirlwind of questions. Where would she begin? What format would suit her ideas? Did she truly possess the courage to lay herself bare before an audience? With her mind racing, she walked toward the small park nearby. The early evening sky morphed into a canvas of vibrant hues, the colors swirling together much like her thoughts. As she strolled beneath the intermittent streetlights, the movement eased her racing heart, allowing space for contemplation. She envisioned her first post, how it could unravel her journey, her struggles with vulnerability, and the moments that challenged her. Image after image cascaded through her mind, the stuttering nerves before speaking up in meetings, the anxiety cloaked in silence at social gatherings. There were stories she had kept tucked away, faint echoes of fear and shame. Yet now, they shimmered with potential, glistening under the warm glow of possibility. The notion of vulnerability was both empowering and daunting. Could she truly give voice to her experiences without succumbing to the judgmental nature of the world? The fear of exposure crept back into her thoughts. What if she opened the floodgates only to find that, beneath the water's surface, there were mere stones instead of treasures? As she settled onto a bench, Sarah pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen, hesitating to write. She needed a foundation, a structure to guide her thoughts. A sudden pulse of inspiration surged, shifting her perspective one more notch. Perhaps her very hesitance, her inner turmoil and the second-guessing, could be an integral part of the narrative. Her thumb danced across the keyboard as she drafted the opening lines. Do you fear judgment? Do you falter in moments when your voice feels stifled? Each word felt like a small triumph against her doubts. Sharing even this minimal insight marked a deliberate step beyond her former self. But as she delved deeper into her outline, uncertainty returned, clinging to her like mist. Unintentionally, she began to measure the potential risks with each passage. Would she endure scrutiny, or worse, silence? The thought sat heavily on her chest. In her past, facing criticism had often led to retreat, but Claire's encouragement echoed in her mind. Growth could only arise from confrontation, from wrestling with discomfort until it yielded something meaningful. Focus on the journey, not just the end goal, she whispered to herself, recalling Claire's statement. Reflecting on her awakening, she realized that more than a blog, this was about forging an identity, embracing her complexities and the lessons woven through them. Suddenly inspired, she resumed writing. Groping for honesty, she penned about the often unseen battles, those moments when the journey seemed overwhelmingly solitary. Maybe someone else might resonate with her experiences. Inviting others into her world could lead to connections she had yet to imagine. Emerging thoughts called her back to reality. The world around her was pulsating with life. She felt an urge to share her progress with Claire and to enlist her feedback. But along with that impulse came a new feeling, an underlying urgency to address her fears, head-on and in real time. What if she sought out a public speaking class, or asked a local group if they would host her first workshop? A transforming realization swept over her. She must begin to live what she was writing about. Waiting for the perfect moment had kept her stagnant, so she would take actionable steps instead. The public speaking class became a bold promise she made to herself as she brushed her hair back resolutely. Leaving the park, Sarah felt enveloped in a growing resolve. She was no more the hesitant girl defined by fear. She was moving towards the person she aspired to be. Yet, as she navigated the streets back home, another question niggled at her mind, underscoring the excitement and anxiety coursing through her. What would she face when she truly ventured into the world, vulnerable and raw? The moment she'd been preparing for now felt imminent, and alongside her burgeoning strength, a knot of apprehension tightened within her chest. Could she truly handle what lay ahead? Would stepping into this realm reveal not just her voice, but the doubts that haunted her? One thing was clear. The stage was set, but nothing could prepare her for the uncomfortable spotlight awaiting her next chapter. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over Sarah's path, she felt the weight of her decisions pressing heavily. Determination surged within her, ignited by the vision of the new chapter she was eager to begin. She returned home with a commitment to not only write her blog, but to take charge of her voice, actively pursuing growth and understanding. That evening, Sarah carefully crafted her first blog entry, focusing on the concept of vulnerability. With each word, she unlocked the courage to express her deepest fears and unvarnished truths. She transformed hesitant feelings into articulate thoughts, determined to connect authentically with her readers. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's the birthplace of connection, she stated, each typed letter resonating with the strength of her resolve. After posting it online, Sarah felt an exhilarating mix of anticipation and anxiety. Would others accept her for who she was? Previously, she had shied away from self-expression, working under the limit of her insecurities. But now she leaned into her authenticity. She had conquered the initial step. She was not hiding anymore, but stepping into the light. The next morning brought unexpected validation. Notifications began trickling in. Likes, shares, and heartfelt comments flooding the digital space she had created. Readers resonated with her candidness. Friends reached out, expressing admiration. And even those who once seemed distant offered encouragement. In contrast to her prior self-perception, she felt seen and valued. Yet it wasn't just the digital applause that fueled her transformation. A few days later, propelled by the momentum of her newfound visibility, Sarah enrolled in a local public speaking class. She walked into that first session filled with the duality of fear and resilience. Here, emotions churned. Her heart raced, but it was a heart ready for the challenge, bolstered by the recognition of her worth. Throughout the course, Sarah practiced standing tall while presenting her ideas, cultivating a compelling narrative. With each session, her confidence grew, unfurling layers of self-doubt long encased within her. Fellow participants became allies, sharing their own vulnerabilities, and in turn, she formed bonds that validated her journey. Public speaking became a platform for action. She eventually organized a workshop where she shared her story of vulnerability, resilience, and the power of human connection. The room pulsed with energy as she engaged her audience, speaking openly and genuinely about her experiences. She watched faces brighten with understanding. In that moment, she realized this was her achievement. She was no longer confined to her perceived limitations. She was igniting discussion and inspiring others to embrace their truths. After the workshop, Sarah received feedback that filled her with profound joy. Participants approached her with gratitude, testament to the impact of her vulnerability. In her mind, the fears that used to loom large felt diminished, transformed into stepping stones on a path of empowerment. Striding back home, she took a moment to reflect. The stark contrast between the Sarah that once hesitated, burdened by grief and uncertainty, and the Sarah now brimming with assertiveness was breathtaking. She had conquered her internal struggles, harnessed the gifts of her experiences, and emerged with a solid sense of self. Recognizing the progress she'd made filled her with immense pride, not vanity, but a true acknowledgement of her journey. She understood that accepting vulnerability as a strength allowed her to forge connections, develop empathy, and engage in authentic dialogue with herself and others. The echoes of grief no longer weighed her down. Rather, they propelled her toward healing and connection. Those lessons would accompany her always, as she continued to navigate life. With the realization that vulnerability can pave the way for growth, she felt equipped to face whatever challenges lay ahead. This was merely the beginning of her exploration into personal fulfillment, but she now stood tall, grounded in her identity as a resilient individual, deserving of every opportunity that came her way. The rest of the world was waiting with open arms, and Sarah was ready to embrace it. Now, it's your turn. You need to subscribe immediately so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire and transform lives. Leave a like now to support the channel and feed the algorithm that brings this content to those in need of encouragement. Comment below your thoughts and theories about Sarah's incredible journey and her transformational growth. Don't wait. Even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who would benefit from this uplifting conclusion. Let's spread the word about personal overcoming stories and make a difference together.